All right, so our project was to create an ESP32 clock. So we were using an ESP32 microcontroller with a display and a couple of buttons, but our core requirements were connect to the NTP server and get time from the internet, connect regularly to the NTP server to resync up the time, output the stored time to the display, output date on display, show time not only in the digital format, but also in analog, and give user access to a menu to choose different options. Our extended requirements or our extensions were have one option in the menu that lets the user choose between 24 hours and 12-hour format, and give the user the option to choose which time zone they are in. So those are our core and our extended requirements.
So this is what it looks like in action. We have as already mentioned, we have the time in analog, we have the time in digital, we have the date right here. The way the buttons work, we have decided to go with basically like capacitive wires. So I could simply plug in a wire into one of these ports up here and simply touch the end of it, as you can see. However, for demonstration purposes, I will just touch it with this piece of metal. So as you can see, we can go through the menu options, and let me just go back to the beginning. So this is what it looks like in the beginning. We can choose the time zone, as you could see there a second ago. We can start the timer. We can restart the timer, and we can go back. Excuse me, this one. The time format, we can change between 24 and 12 hours, as you can see here. And we can exit the menu. That's what it looks like. This is the Wi-Fi antenna with which the ESP32 talks to the internet. And again, this is being synced up regularly, which we will talk about in a second in the code. Let me change my camera for that and share my screen to show what this looks like. So here we have the code. Let's start in the main file. So at the very beginning, we have we set a whole bunch of variables. Most of these are used for buttons, presses, etc. There is one that we use for the screen. In the setup function, we simply start communication with the PC. This is mostly for troubleshooting. We go through setup the pin modes, we begin communication with the display, and then we prepare the display. After this, we connect to the Wi-Fi, we set the offsets, and down here, this is probably the most interesting thing. We actually create a function that is running on a separate core, and this way, whenever we reconnect to the internet, this doesn't interrupt the time that is being displayed on the OLED screen. In the loop, this is simply what is done over and over again. Basically, this is just going through making sure that the time is still the actual time as of right now, and we prepare the screen, the buffer within the screen, and then at the very end we send whatever is in the buffer to the screen. In between, we also check for the button presses and do whatever these are being told. The Wi-Fi and time test, this is the function that we assign to the different core early on, the CPU core. And again, this is just making sure that the time is up to date. Let's go check out the Wi-Fi manager next. This is being called when we connect to the Wi-Fi in the beginning. At the very beginning, we need the SSID and password from the secrets file, this is what it should look like. At the moment, it's just ESP32 test and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this is being used to connect to the Wi-Fi. Basically, if it doesn't work, we're just printing out a whole bunch of dots to the terminal. Otherwise, we tell it that we connected to the Wi-Fi. Down here is what we do whenever we are trying to reconnect to the internet and trying to retrieve the time. This is done in an interval of 10,000 milliseconds. This could be adjusted to however long or short you would need it. Let's talk next how we bring all of this on the display, on the screen. So as mentioned in the beginning, we have to prepare it. For that, we need to clear the buffer. That's basically done here. We set the font mode and bitmap mode. These are just things the UHG2 library uses. In here, we send a time to the display buffer. Basically, we just get it from the real-time clock of the ESP32. We check if it's 12-hour or 24-hour the user wants, and then we print out either the hours in 12-hour format or the hours in 24 hours format and the minutes, and then the colon in between, as you could see earlier, is flashing every other second. Down here, we do the same thing with the date, basically. This one is showing the analog time, which there is a bit of calculation that needs to be done. Down here, we need to draw the clock hands. They need the angle in a radian rather than degrees, so we had to convert this up here and call that function with the radians instead of degrees. And then after this, we basically write all of that in the display buffer and send that to the screen. So that's from my side. Daniel will take over the rest.
All right. So for my section, we're going over the menu. The menu is quite a few lines of code, but we'll just go through it pretty briefly. Up here at the beginning, we just go through and establish our variables that we're going to use throughout the menu. So we have our different menu options. So this is just our UTC offset, the main menu options, if daylight savings is going, the time format menus. Then we have the index that the user is in the menu. Main menu index is always set to 0 from the beginning. These other indexes are based off of the user preferences. They default to 0 they default to either 0 for UTC offsets, so the 12 index, or 0 for false for the daylight savings time, or 24 hours, so 1. And then from there, we set up our initial XY where we draw the menu options. From there, we have a couple functions that get the index based off of the user stored preference. So we get the user's stored UTC offset, and then we search through the UTC menu options and return that index. Same thing for the get DST off index. We're just storing the index in the preferences, so we return either 0 or 1, essentially. From there, we can create our initial menu, which just says menu and it's underlined, letting the user know they can enter the menu. From there, we go into our button presses. So we have enter pressed. If the user isn't in a menu already, we enter the main menu. If they are, then we handle their selection based on the context of what menu they're in. So in handle selection, we essentially just check which menu they're in, and then based off of that, do different actions. So if they're in the daylight savings menu, we go through and we set their new daylight saving preference in the preferences, and then we go through and we update the time based off of their new preferences for time zone. They're in the time zone menu. we store their time zone preference and go into the daylight savings. If they're in the timer, we will reset and exit the timer based off of the enter button. Time format, same idea, store that. And if they're not in any of those three sub menus, then we handle the main menu selection. So if they're at index 0, that was the time zone. Index 1 is timer. Index 2 is the time format. And 3 is exit the menu. From there, we have forward menu and backward menu. Both of these just kind of based off of the index, either move the underlined value forward or backward, depending on the menu they're in. The only difference is in the timer. If they hit forward, then it's going to pause or start the timer. If they hit backward, it's going to restart the timer. So that's the only difference compared to the other menus. They're not toggling forward or backward. They're doing something with the timer. From there, we're going to display our main menu. We have several of these display menu functions. They're all going to work very similarly. So I'll just go over this one. We prep the menu. So this just clears the menu area, clears any text that was there. We get our initial X and Y values, and then we're going to calculate. This will change a little bit. The number that we're going to show in the main menu, they're a little bit bigger, so it's 2 items at a time. So we calculate the total number of menu options and the start. So we go through and just choose. That way, the underlined value never goes off the screen for the user. We just show the 2 and they're underlined. So this is the one that goes through all of the menu options, going from the start index that we set up above to the end index, just depending on how many options we want to show. Then it draws them on the screen, and if the index is equal to our like big main index, the index of the value is the same as the menu index, then we underline it. So that's the same in several of these. So we have display timer, display daylight savings, display timer, display time format, and then we have some helper functions to prep menu is just setting the font, and then calling this function above it clear previous text, which just clears that bottom area. Throughout that, we're using the preference utilities. So these are how the user stores their time zone preferences, daylight savings preferences, and then the time format. So this one basically just interacts with the preferences, either getting or setting different values. And then the timer utilities, this is just some helper functions for the timer. So we format the time because we get it in milliseconds, and then we format it to be hour, month, second string. We have the initiate timer, which just starts it. Toggle timer is just either pause or resume based off of the current context of the timer. Restart timer restarts it running. Reset timer resets it, but it isn't running anymore. Is timer running? Just checks if the timer is currently running. And then get elapsed times just gets the current elapsed milliseconds. So that is the utilities, and that's our project. It's pretty cool.